Well, hey, folks, and welcome back to another ministry conversation. Let me start with a question that might sound obvious, but stick with me. Why does your church exist? Let's say that someone walked up to you at the store and said, "What's your church actually trying to accomplish?" Do you think you could give them a clear answer in maybe just 30 seconds? Well, today I want to take you back to two foundational commands that Jesus gave us and show you why getting clear on your church's mission isn't just helpful, it's very essential. If you look in Matthew 22, Jesus was asked what the greatest commandment was. And in verse 37, he begins and he said, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind." This is the greatest and most important command. The second is like it: love your neighbor as yourself. The great commandment, love God, love people, everything flows from that. And then you go on later, Matthew 28, before Jesus ascended to heaven. Then in verse 19, he gave what we call the Great Commission. He said, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe everything I've commanded you. And remember, I am with you always to the end of the age." Well, here's what I want us to see together. Those aren't two separate things. The Great Commission is how we live out the Great Commandment. When we love God with everything we have, we want others to know Him too. And when we love our neighbor as ourselves, we want them to experience that life change that comes from following Jesus. So every church exists for the same basic reason: to help people love God and love others by becoming disciples of Christ. But here's where it gets interesting. I want to tell you something that happened to me a few years ago. I was visiting a church and I was sitting around a table with about 8 members of a leadership team, people who'd been there for years, right? They weren't new members. And I handed each one of them a piece of paper and I asked them to write down your church's mission in one sentence. Here's what I got back. Can you guess? I got 8 different answers. 8. From people in the same church, sitting at the same table. One person, if I recall right, said to worship God. Another one wrote to help people in need. Someone else put down to teach the Bible. And another said to bring people to Jesus. Now look, all those are good answers, and they're all true in their own way. But 8 different people had 8 different ideas about what their church was actually trying to accomplish. If the people inside a church can't agree on the mission, how are we all going to be aiming at the right target? So why does this happen? Well, why do committed church members in the same congregation have completely different ideas about their church's mission? Well, think of it like this. It's like taking a boat out on the lake. You start with a destination in mind, maybe the little other side of the lake you're trying to get to, but if you don't keep steering toward that destination, you'll drift. You've got the wind working against you, you've got those little waves in the lake, and then sometimes something just distracts you, so you want to go over there and you want to go have a look. Those things all take you off course. You might still have a great day on the water, you might catch some fish, you might enjoy the sun, you'll have a good time, but at the end of the day, you're just not where you intended to go. We see churches drift the same way. We start with a very clear sense of purpose, but life happens. Good opportunities come up, needs arise, people suggest new ideas, and little by little, without really making any bad decisions, we end up somewhere we didn't plan to be. We're still doing ministry, don't get me wrong. We're still helping people. We're still faithful. But we've drifted from our original mission, and we might not even realize it. And just like that boat in the water, the longer you drift, the harder it becomes to get back on course. So how do we stop the drift? How do we get a church to get back on course toward the mission that Jesus gave us? Well, it starts with getting everyone on the same page about what we're actually trying to accomplish. And that means going back to what Jesus said. The Great Commandment and the Great Commission, remember, those aren't suggestions. Those are our marching orders. Love God, love people, and make disciples. That's the destination that we're steering toward. But here's the key. Every church has to figure out how to live out this mission in their own community. We've all got our unique people in our church, and we've all got specific circumstances around us. Your church's mission should be how you uniquely live out the Great Commandment and the Great Commission in your community. Now, here's what I'd suggest to any church that maybe feels a little adrift. And this is the exercise that I'll show you if you've drifted off course. Gather your key leaders around the table. Hand everyone a piece of paper and ask them to write down what our church's mission is in one sentence. Don't let them discuss it. Just tell them to write it down. If you get similar answers, great, because you're probably on course then. But if you get wildly different answers like I did, maybe you've got a little work to do. Once you know where you stand, start with the biblical foundation. How is God calling our specific church to help people love Him more and love others better through making disciples? And then ask, given our community, given our people in our church, given our location and our resources, what's the specific way that we're going to live out this mission? And here's the thing, once you get clear on your mission, everything else becomes a question of, does this help us accomplish our mission or not? Church members, you can help this by not asking, what programs does our church offer, but instead saying, how can I help our church accomplish its mission? I want you to just imagine if everyone in your church could all clearly explain why your church exists and how they are personally part of that mission. Imagine if every ministry in your church was designed to help people take their next step toward loving God and loving others. You see, that's what can happen when churches get clear on their mission and they align everything they do with that mission. It doesn't mean you become a perfect church, but it does mean you become a focused church. And focused churches have more impact. Listen, if your church has been faithfully serving your community for years, thank God for that faithfulness. Much of what you're doing probably connects wonderfully to the mission that Jesus gave us. But if you are feeling a little scattered, if your people seem unclear about the church's direction, if you're busy but not really seeing people growing in their faith, maybe it's time to get back to the basics. The Great Commandment leads to the Great Commission. Love God, love people, and make disciples. Everything else is just details. Well, next time in our ministry conversation, we're going to be talking about prayer, because clear mission without God's power are just good intentions. So we'll see you next time for our next conversation. Keep the mission clear. God bless and have a great day. Bye.